I used to think endings were loud. A slammed door, a shouted word, a suitcase dragged down a staircase at midnight. But the night my family left me behind, the ending was quiet. Just a soft ding from my phone at 11:02 p.m., a sound so small it could have been a toaster, and yet it split my life cleanly in two. Mom, we decided it would be better if you didn't join us this year. Lauren thinks it would be too much for the kids. Thanks again for arranging everything. You've done more than enough. We'll send pictures. No punctuation at the end, as if there was nothing more to say. The kitchen light hummed above the sink. My suitcase waited by the door, zipper faced toward the world like a smile I'd rehearsed. On the table, 6 straw hats with little name tags, Evan, Nora, Josh, Lily, were lined up like tiny domes of summer. Travel-sized sunscreens sat next to them in a row, labeled with my careful handwriting. I'd put seashell keychains inside each child's tote bag, engraved, "Grandma loves you." I had packed a coral bracelet for Lauren because she always claimed coral looked good on her. I had printed the itinerary on thick paper, hole-punched the corner and tied it with twine. It looked like a wedding favor. The dream had that kind of effort. And then one text. Not an argument, not a phone call, not even a lie I could get my hands around. Just we decided, Lauren thinks. You've done enough. My husband Tom had been gone 5 years. He did everything gently, even leaving. Fell asleep during the news and never woke up. After the memorial, people said things like, "You're so strong and at least you had him for so long." I nodded, because there are no courses that teach other people how to stand near your grief without making it about them. Later, in the quiet, I found the single sentence of his I kept returning to. People don't forget kindness, Maggie. They just forget who gave it. My name is Margaret, but most people who loved me used Maggie, even when love got tired and turned into routine. That night, I held the phone and tried to understand how a routine becomes a replacement for being seen. The savings account I had named Hawaii Fund showed $23,648.12. 3 years of extra work, late-night online classes teaching English to students who logged in from the future according to my clock, a winter without fresh flowers, a summer with the thermostat higher than comfort and lower than shame, a garage sale that let go of the couch Tom always said was too soft but sat on anyway. I had made a simple bargain with the universe. If I give everything, maybe I can gather everyone. If I plan it perfectly, maybe the past will feel less jagged. The present might remember how to be kind. I imagined the beach we'd visited when Tom was 39 and I was 36, before Daniel started school, before the arguments about money, before the distance that grew like moss and then, somehow, like ivy. The ocean doesn't remember names, Tom once teased, but I always thought it remembered footsteps. I wanted my grandchildren to leave theirs next to mine. 4 small maps pressed into sand, proof we had been together on purpose. I didn't answer the text. I didn't tell Daniel it hurt. There's a particular humiliation in explaining to your own child that you are a person and not a service. I stared at the button I'd never planned to touch. Freeze account. And my hand moved like it belonged to someone braver. The bank's page flickered. Then a clean, decisive line of text appeared. Transactions suspended. At 10:04 the next morning, the alerts began. Payment attempt declined. Please verify authorization. Merchant request denied. I imagined the airport, the shining floors you can almost see yourself in, the carts that never roll straight, the gate agent with calm eyebrows. Lauren would lift her chin in that efficient way she learned in corporate meetings. Daniel would try to talk faster than the problem. The children would be busy with anything that wasn't an adult's face. A pause would expand in the space between their plans and reality. The pause would have my outline. The phone rang. It rang again. A third time. I turned it face down on the table and covered it with the coral bracelet. That small circle of color was exactly the shade of an apology people send in the mail, late and pretty. By noon, the kitchen smelled like rain, the real kind, not the candle kind. I made oatmeal because I couldn't think of anything less celebratory. I sat at the table and ate it slowly, as if hunger could be a ritual for starting over. Then I opened my laptop and found an email I had starred 2 months earlier and ignored. The subject line read, Seafarer's Workshop, Volunteer Inquiry. Tom used to say I needed the ocean more than any person he'd ever known. You listen to it like it's reading you back to yourself, he joked. The Seafarer's Workshop restored old Coast Guard rescue boats and used them to teach teenagers basic seamanship. They offered room and board for retirees who could sand, paint, or make coffee without setting things on fire. The application had 2 questions that mattered. What can you do? And what do you want to do? The first answer was ordinary. I can sand, paint, organize, take notes, show up. The second answer surprised me when I typed it. I want to be useful without disappearing. I pressed send. That afternoon, I took down the list on the refrigerator. The magnet holding it in place was a small lighthouse Tom bought me at a roadside store. I'd kept it because it felt like a spell. As long as the lighthouse held the list, we were still going. I set the list aside and left the lighthouse where it was. Light, I decided, didn't need a destination to be real. By 5, another message from the bank. Suspicious activity resolved. A corporate way of saying, we heard you say no. The airport likely found other solutions. Someone's card, someone's credit, someone's patience. A family can build a bridge out of almost anything when the first instinct is to cross and the second is to blame. I washed the mugs, wiped the table, and put the hats back in their box. Then I put the box in the hall closet, second shelf. Behind the board games, we only took out when the power went out and conversation felt safer when supervised by dice. That night, I slept the way people do after a small surgery. Lightly, aware of where the wound is, unwilling to touch it and unable to forget it. In the morning, a reply waited in my inbox. Hi, Margaret. We would love to have you. We're starting on a 1960s rescue skiff that served 2 coastal towns and then spent 25 years rotting behind a shuttered marina. She's battered but beautiful. There's a cot in the volunteer room and a good fan. Dave will meet you at the bus station. Bring clothes you can ruin. Seafarer's Workshop, I could hear Tom laugh. That's exactly your kind of invitation. I wrote back with the dates. Then I packed like a person who wasn't leaving anything behind, work jeans, long-sleeve shirts, my oldest sneakers, a framed photo nobody else remembered to miss, the coral bracelet. I didn't mean to. It just ended up there. And the lighthouse magnet which I borrowed from the fridge with a promise to return it. On the bus west, the fields were the color of ideas that never got planted. Diners appeared like punctuation in a paragraph too long for its own good. I slept in pieces and woke up in halves. Somewhere in Arizona, my phone buzzed with Daniel's name. I let it ring out, then listened to the voicemail in the dim afterlight. Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't think. I'm not asking you to fix it. I just wanted to say, I love you. Shame tries to be a redemption if you let it. I put the phone back in my bag and looked out the window until the desert convinced me forgiveness could be a landscape you walk across, not a document you sign. Dave was waiting at the station in a hat that looked like it, had stories. He waved like a neighbor. Margaret? He asked, though he'd clearly already decided I was. Yes, I said, and liked that the words sounded like myself. We don't expect anything fancy, he said as he loaded my suitcase into the truck. But we do love the people who show up. I can do both, I said. Not fancy, showing up. He grinned. The workshop sat in the soft elbow of a small harbor. The air smelled like salt, varnish, and the beginning of something. I met the skiff. Battered was kind. She wore her years like a bruise not ready to be covered. Someone had stenciled laurel on her stern decades ago. The letters were faded, not gone. Why laurel? I asked. Old captain's wife, Dave said. Or a tree, or hope. People name boats after the things that don't leave. We scraped, we sanded, we laughed. We didn't talk about families. It was relief the way shade is relief. Present, unannounced, necessary. On the third day, a woman with silver hair and serious eyes arrived with coffee that smelled less like rust. "Grace," she said, and the name fit her like a jacket that knows your shoulders. We worked side by side for an hour without learning a single thing people usually ask. Then she said, "You move like you're listening to directions no one else can hear." "I am," I said, and left it there. Afternoons bled into evenings, paint into wood, strangers into something like trust. I slept on the cot and woke with the particular ache that means you used your body for something that mattered. Lauren's name moved lower in my mind. Daniel's voice grew steadier from a distance. The children were safe on a beach I had imagined for them. I let the idea of that be my comfort instead of the fact I wasn't there to witness it. 2 weeks in, Lauren's name flashed again. I answered because a person can only stall a bridge if she plans to live on one side forever. "Hi, Margaret," she began, careful, the way you hold a glass you might drop. I wanted to say, "You don't have to," I said, and I meant it kindly. "I do," she said, and I let her. I was overwhelmed. After my mother died, I've been... She paused. "I didn't want you to see me ugly. Isn't that ridiculous? I wanted a trip where I could pretend I was the kind of mother who makes everything feel easy, a vacation without fragility. I could have asked you to come and help, and instead I made you a symbol of everything I couldn't control. I'm sorry. That's not forgiveness material. It's just the truth. Truth is a light. It doesn't fix the room. It lets you see it." "Thank you for telling me," I said. "I'm okay." "Are you?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "for the first time in a while." "We'd like to see you when you're ready," she said. "If you want that. If not, I'll still send pictures." "Send them," I said, and when we hung up, I felt a strange, almost silly warmth. Not because we were cured, because we had our names back. Not mom and daughter-in-law, Margaret and Lauren, people who could make eye contact with their mistakes. Grace didn't ask what the call was about. She handed me a brush. "Second coat," she said, "is where you fall in love." I did. On a Tuesday, the local paper sent a kid with a camera. He interviewed Dave while pretending not to be amazed by the way Grace bossed me around with affection. He asked if he could take a picture, and I said yes, even though I had paint in my hair and a constellation of freckles I acquired at 40 and kept as a map. The photo caught me mid-laugh, my hand touching the letter R on Laurel, as if proving that things can be reborn without being replaced. Daniel texted that night, saw the article online. The kids cut out your picture and taped it to the fridge. Evan says he wants to build boats now. Nora says you look like someone who knows secrets. "I do," I typed and didn't send. Some secrets are just old truths with new light on them. A week later, they arrived in a rental car that smelled like lemon soap. Daniel looked a little older. Lauren looked like a person who had cried and didn't want to hide it. The children ran right past me to the boat the way children run toward the obvious story. That was mercy. That was a door I could step through. "We brought dinner," Lauren said, holding a paper bag like a peace treaty. "And no speeches," Daniel added, because he knows me well enough to disarm me before I arm myself. We ate on the dock, grilled fish, too much coleslaw, lemonade that tasted like the color yellow. We didn't talk about Hawaii. We talked about paint that won't dry if the air is sulking, about teenagers who sand with the rage of poets, about how a boat coming back to itself looks like forgiveness from the right angle. After, Evan asked if he could hold the rope while I taught him the knot I'd learned from Tom the summer before Daniel started first grade. I watched his small fingers fail and try again, the way hope does when it's learning a new shape. Lauren stood beside me, quiet. "I was wrong," she said finally, softly, like laying a blanket over a sleeping child. "I thought the only way to feel like a family again was to eliminate witnesses to what I couldn't fix. You were never the problem. You were the witness I was afraid of." "I know," I said. And I did. I had been my own witness too late, too many times. When they left, we hugged like people who had practiced and were ready to do it for real. Daniel whispered, "I love you," into my shoulder, as if he could tuck it there, safe, in case we forgot again. The children waved from the car with both hands, the international sign for, "We aren't done." That night, I walked to the pier alone. Across the bay, the lighthouse blinked awake, its beam sweeping the seam between water and sky like a patient teacher, underlining the same sentence, "Here, here, here." I touched the lighthouse magnet in my pocket and laughed at myself for bringing a talisman to a place where the original stood. Tom's locket rested against my skin. I opened it and pressed my finger to the faded photo we had taken at a picnic, where the potato salad was terrible and the day was perfect. "You said it would take me longer than it should," I whispered. "You were right again. Don't let it go to your head." The next morning, I woke with the particular quiet that means you didn't win or lose. You just belonged to yourself again. Grace had left a note on my toolbox. "Coffee at 7. Second coat is the marriage. Third coat is the faith." Dave had circled a date on the calendar for Laurel's launch and written community welcome in block letters like a promise. I stood at the stern and ran my hand over the curve we had rebuilt until it felt like memory. The word Laurel looked new enough to believe in, old enough to respect. Me too, I thought. Me too. The weeks that followed moved differently. Morning light crawled across the harbor like an old cat, slow and deliberate. I rose before it reached my cot, made coffee that tasted like courage, and walked down the wooden dock to where Laurel waited. The sea air rusted everything it touched, except my will to keep sanding. Grace said restoration was just forgiveness, wearing overalls. She wasn't wrong. Some days teenagers from the local high school came by for service hours. They arrived pretending they didn't care, headphones dangling, but left smelling like varnish and purpose. I showed them how to hold the sandpaper flat, how to listen for the rhythm when wood and hand start agreeing on what smooth means. They called me Miss Maggie. I let them. It sounded less formal than Margaret and less ghostly than Mom. On Sundays, the veterans came. They told stories in half sentences about fog that never lifted, about jokes that stopped being funny when the men who told them didn't come back. We didn't cry. We nodded. The nod was our language for me, too. Sometimes I caught myself thinking about the Hawaii Fund. The money still sat there frozen. I hadn't decided what to do with it. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was a question mark waiting for meaning. Every time I opened the banking app, the numbers looked like a code I hadn't solved yet. One windy afternoon, Grace brought lunch wrapped in newspaper. "Eat," she said. "You work like someone who's trying to outrun time." "I am," I told her, "and for once I think I'm winning." She smiled, lines deepening around eyes that had seen enough endings to trust beginnings when they came disguised as chores. "Till the visit. Second chance." A month later, Daniel wrote again. The message was longer this time. "Mom, the kids keep asking when we can see you. Nora told her teacher, you build boats now. She says you're famous in the paper. We'd like to visit if you're open to it." The first time they came, it had felt like walking barefoot on glass, each word chosen carefully, each step cautious. This time, when the rental car turned into the gravel lot, I didn't brace myself. I just kept painting the railing until Daniel's shadow covered my hand. "Hi, Mom." "Hand me the brush," I said. "Third coat needs consistency." He took it without hesitation. The children scattered toward the dock. Their laughter slipped through the wind like gulls. Lauren stayed back, eyes lowered, a new calm around her mouth. "I thought about calling," she said. "You just did," I answered. We didn't rehash. Guilt doesn't need an audience. It just needs room to breathe until it turns into responsibility. Lauren knelt beside me and started wiping the wet paint that dripped down. For a long while, we worked in silence, two women sanding different kinds of damage. When the sun began to sink, Dave yelled from across the yard, "Dinner's ready, ladies. I overcooked the fish again." We laughed like old friends because maybe we were. That night, over paper plates and lemonade, Nora asked, "Grandma, will Laurel really float?" I said, "She already does, she just doesn't know it yet." Launch day. The morning of the launch smelled like rain pretending to be brave. Half the town showed up. The veterans wore press jackets, the students brought cameras, and the mayor gave a short speech that nobody really listened to. Grace handed me a pair of scissors wrapped in blue ribbon. "You're christening her," she said. "Captain's orders." The crowd clapped politely. I stepped forward, cut the ribbon, and whispered to the hull, "Thank you for teaching me how to stay above water." The boat slid into the sea like it remembered how. The water accepted her without judgment. People cheered. Cameras clicked. Somewhere behind me, Lauren was crying quietly. Daniel's hand rested on her shoulder. The children waved from the dock, their voices high and wild. And in that noise, I heard Tom. Not his words, just the sound he used to make when he watched fireworks, a small hum of awe, the sound of a man who believed beauty was a form of prayer. After everyone left, I stayed behind. The tide came in slow, patient. Grace packed up the cups. Dave turned off the lights. I sat on the dock and let the cold seep through my jeans until my heartbeat matched the rhythm of the waves. The letter. The following week, a white envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a typed note. "Dear Mrs. Caldwell, we're writing to inform you that the Seafarers Workshop has been selected for a small community grant. Your name was submitted as primary nominee by an anonymous donor. The funds will be allocated for further restoration projects and youth training. Congratulations, and thank you for your service to the community. Coastal Heritage Foundation." There was a check enclosed. Exactly $23,648.12. I laughed so hard I scared the cat that had started sleeping near my door. The Hawaii Fund had found its own way home. I never learned who the donor was, but I had a feeling. A woman with coral-colored nails who'd finally forgiven herself. I walked down to the dock that night, held the check against the wind, and whispered, "Tom, you really would laugh at this one." The moonlight hit the water, and for the first time in years, I felt something like pride that didn't ache. When Grace announced she was leaving to visit her daughter, we threw a small party. Coffee, pie, and stories we'd all told twice. She hugged me tight. "You're not just fixing boats, Maggie," she said. "You're proof that things survive because someone believes they can." I wanted to tell her she'd done the same for me, but the lump in my throat built a wall higher than language. Instead, I nodded, the way we veterans of quiet do. After she left, the workshop felt too large. I filled the silence by teaching the teenagers knots and patience. One of them, a boy named Jordan, asked, "How do you know when something's really fixed?" "When it stops asking for attention," I said. He thought about it. "Does that work for people too?" "Sometimes," I said, "but people usually need reminding." The return of light. Winter crept in without invitation. The air grew sharp, the mornings blew cold. I kept working, wrapping my scarf twice, humming Tom's off-key Christmas songs under my breath. Letters from Daniel arrived every few weeks. Updates, photos of the kids holding little wooden boats they'd built in school. Lauren's new job helping run a community garden. Each envelope felt less like guilt and more like gratitude, learning how to speak. On New Year's Eve, I walked to the lighthouse. The beam swept the sea, unwavering. I placed the lighthouse magnet on a rock near the base, a small tribute from one keeper to another. "You can stay here now," I whispered. "Your work is done." Back at the workshop, I lit a candle on the railing of Laurel. The flame danced wildly in the wind but refused to go out. I thought of all the times I dimmed myself to make others comfortable. Not tonight. At midnight, fireworks bloomed behind the hills. I watched their reflections shimmer across the harbor and realized something simple. Endings and beginnings are the same noise heard at different distances. Epilogue. The Lighthouse Keeper. Years later, tourists would come to the harbor and see the small plaque near the workshop gate. Margaret Caldwell, 1956. Teacher, builder, lightkeeper. She believed the ocean remembers those who listen. Sometimes I still walk down the dock before sunrise when the world is made of salt and silver. I sit by Laurel, now moored and faithful, and watch the horizon grow from blue to gold. The light sweeps across the water, steady as breath. I imagine Tom somewhere in that brightness, grinning, hands in his pockets, saying, "You did it, Maggie. You came back to yourself." And I whisper, "Finally." The wind carries it away, folds it into the sound of waves hitting wood, and brings it back again, because the sea, like love, never truly lets go.